all our esteemed audience and the speaker for the evening. I'm immensely pleased to introduce Ratna Bali Madam, Ratna Bali Mitra Madam. She is a professor in economics and finance. She has completed her graduation from Calcutta University and then in economics and then proceeded for MBA. And she obtained her MBA again from Calcutta University. She has done her certification courses from London School of Economics, one of the noted qualifications in finance in India. She has worked in ICICI Bank for nearly 3 years, handling major accounts like TCS and a couple of very forward companies, plus the accounts of industries. And she has involved herself into derivatives, stock market operations, valuations, and a number of things. She has masterized her studies more on economics, and she is a visiting faculty to many of the leading e-commerce institutions in Bangalore, and that includes our institution also. With this brief introduction, we present you Madam Ratna Bali Madam Mitra. Thank you, Madam. Please proceed.
Thank you, Professor Prabhu, for that wonderful introduction. It really makes me feel very honored. Welcome all to this webinar on Make in India opportunities. As you see, this opportunity was first introduced by our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi on 25th of September 2014. He announced his ambitious program of Make in India, terming it as a lion's step towards making the country a destination for global manufacturing by 2020. This would ultimately direct investment, more employment, purchasing power in the hands of the common people. Mr. Modi has come to power on the plank of development and not on the plank of any social objectives. Prior to his coming to power, most political parties have only used social objectives to win elections in India. The primary objective of this Make in India campaign is to boost GDP growth through manufacturing growth in key sectors like infrastructure and defense. As you can see in the graph, India's manufacturing growth has really lagged behind the GDP growth for over 20 years. And this GDP growth has been lagging behind primarily because of the lackadaisical growth in manufacturing. There is a reason why Mr. Narendra Modi prefers to focus so much on manufacturing, because manufacturing is the only sector that can set forth a virtuous cycle. It creates more employment, which in turn gives more purchasing power in the hands of people. This increased consumer demand spurs demand across all industrial segments as well as service sectors, leading to more GDP growth. A buoyant demand sends a positive signal to producers in the nation to produce more, and so the virtuous cycle continues. Manufacturing definitely matters because it can also lead to commercial innovation and increased productive efficiency. The second important reason why this Make in India campaign has been promoted so popularly by Mr. Narendra Modi is that it increases foreign direct investment, commonly known as FDI. Here, I refer to mostly inward FDI, that is FDI coming into India. Each 1% increase in FDI is said to add about 0.4% to a country's GDP growth. So, to boost GDP growth by about 2%, India will need about 5% increase in FDI. That's not the end of the story. Increased FDI also improves India's reserves position and again helps create more jobs in the industrial sector. This significantly enhances the employment prospects of India's numerous low-skilled and unskilled workers. Currently, we have a problem in the sectoral composition of GDP growth. India's GDP story is propelled by growth, which contributes more than 60% currently, but it only employs about 25 to 30% of the workforce. We should remember that the service sector is more knowledge intensive, so it cannot absorb the vast migration of laborers from the agricultural sector. The only solution is to increase manufacturing sector's contribution to India's GDP. There are many other reasons. The third reason that I could think of to promote Make in India as a campaign is that manufacturing can foster innovation, it can protect intellectual property, and also lead to skill development. Of course, more manufacturing means more tax revenues in the country, and the government intends to do that by producing products that meet high quality standards and minimizes the impact on the environment. The question is, why suddenly now there is a greater focus on manufacturing? Now, there are a couple of reasons behind this. We need to understand that today... exactly,
okay.
Yes.
Perfect, okay.
All right. Okay.
Okay, sorry for that.
All right. Okay. So if you see, the question now is why the government realized that manufacturing has to be given importance now. Well, there are two reasons, two things that we need to understand. Currently, India needs to capitalize on its inherent positive domestic factors. So that means India enjoys certain domestic factors which are in its favors. The first factor is the emphatic election results of the 2014 general elections. In more than 3 decades, that's 30 years, we have a stable government. We've not had a stable government in the last 30 years. That's one of the biggest positives for India's growth. The second is, India is currently the world's fastest growing economy. IMF has forecasted 7.5% growth for financial year 2015-16. India has beat China because China has slowed down to 6.5%. It is also among the top 10 greenfield FDI destinations, as according to a report from the McKinsey for the period January to June 2015. It is considered to be the 7th most valued nation brand in the world. India is the first choice for technological multinational companies to set up R&D centers outside their home countries. So in the words of our own Prime Minister, India offers the 3 Ds for business to thrive. 1, democracy, 2, demography, and 3, demand. It has the third largest pool of scientists and technicians in the world. It also has a strong design and R&D capabilities in auto electronics and industrial electronics. These are factors on the domestic front. Now on the international side, China seems to be fast losing its cost advantage due to rising wages. Apparently, it has seen roughly 200% increase in productivity adjusted labor costs. Besides, the Chinese currency appreciated by more than 10% in the last 5 years, forcing to devaluate the yuan in 2015 to increase its export competitiveness. So India now is the right time for India affecting the nation. So the government has designed this Make in India campaign on 4 pillars to boost entrepreneurship. The first pillar is new processes. Government understands that ease of doing business is the single most important factor to promote entrepreneurship. Now, through this technique, the aim is to de-license and deregulate industry during the entire life cycle of a business. A number of initiatives have already been taken to ease business environment in India. For example, validity of industrial licenses have been extended for 3 years. The process for applying for industrial license and industrial entrepreneurial memorandum has been made online on a 24/7 basis through the government's e-business portal. Besides, the process of obtaining environmental clearances has also been made online. The second pillar is new infrastructure. The government intends to develop industrial corridors and smart cities. Apparently, the development of 100 smart cities is to integrate that will power manufacturing along the industrial corridors designed to connect the 4 major metros, that is Delhi, Mumbai, Madras, and Kolkata, and to decongest India's urban housing scenario. The government also intends to create world-class infrastructure based on state-of-the-art technology, communication, and integrated logistics. Besides, existing infrastructure needs to be strengthened through upgradation in industrial clusters. The third pillar to boost entrepreneurship is new sectors. So Make in India campaign has identified 25 sectors, not only in manufacturing, but also in infrastructure and service activities. Finally, the fourth pillar, which is perhaps the most important pillar, is a paradigm shift in how the government interacts with the industry. The government henceforward will partner with industry, and the approach will that be of a facilitator and not that of a regulator anymore. Post-independence, the government has actually restricted industrial growth by being more of an archaic regulator rather than a facilitator. Now the question again is, why manufacturing? Why not services? Why not agriculture? Because manufacturing has not grown. India's share in global manufacturing increased from a paltry 9.9% to a dismal 2% in last 20 years. So that tells you the picture. Share of India's GDP in global GDP has only doubled from 1.2% in the same period. That's 20 years and 1.2%. Literally no change in the share of manufacturing. It was 15% in 1993 in India's GDP, and it is still 15% today, that is 2016. Comparatively, several other rapidly developing economies have in the same period managed to increase their share of manufacturing in GDP to above 20%. Say Thailand, it's 34%. China, it's 32% of GDP. Malaysia, 24% of GDP. Indonesia also 24%, and Philippines 31%. All these nations share the same economic characteristics as India, but they have managed to increase the contribution of their manufacturing sector to the nation's GDP. Now let's look at this contribution of Indian manufacturing towards employment. As you can see, jobs have only increased by 1.8% incrementally annually, whereas jobs in the service sector increased by 6.5%. But remember, these jobs only went to the knowledge workers and not to the illiterate agricultural laborers who are now migrating in vast droves. Indian manufacturing exports has also not done too well, and India has therefore been falling behind the national manufacturing policy targets. Let's look at some pictures. As you can see, India's share of global GDP has increased from 1.2 to 2.5% over the last 20 years. If you compare it with China, it has grown from 2.3 to 8.5% in the same period. So that's a 4-time increase. If you look at the United States, Germany, and Japan, you cannot really compare because these three nations were one of the oldest industrialized nations. So obviously they industrialized much earlier than India did or China did. Best comparison obviously is with China. China's share of global manufacturing is remarkable from 3.1% to 24.1% in 2013. So that is 8 times in roughly 20 years. Whereas what have we done? We have started from 0.9% to 2% of global GDP. We are way short in our contribution, manufacturing contribution in world GDP too. India's share of global merchandise exports increased from only 0.5% to 1.7%, and China's from 2.4% to 11.5%. That's 5 times approximately. So India needs to actually focus a lot on manufacturing to sustain its GDP growth targets of 8+% for the next 10 years. Here is a national manufacturing policy target. We have a target of manufacturing GDP about 32 trillion INR by the year 2022. At the rate at which we are going, we will maximum reach 18 trillion INR, giving us a gap of 74%. Now, share of manufacturing GDP as a share of overall GDP, we need to increase, according to the National Manufacturing Policy, to 25% of GDP by the target year 2022. We are currently at 15% of GDP. That's a roughly increase of 9 percentage points in the next 6 or 7 years, or 8 years, sorry. So that's a huge amount of work that needs to be got done. Look at the employment situation. FY14, we have manufacturing's contribution to employment is only 54 million. But National Manufacturing Policy has set a target of 150 million jobs by the year 2022. So the shortfall is 85 million, again to be achieved in the next 8 years. That's a tall order. So the government's project of Make in India has identified 25 sectors where more FDI will be invited. Let's look at these sectors now. You have automobiles, you have automobile components, you have aviation, biotechnology, chemicals, construction. Then there is defense manufacturing, electrical machinery, electronic systems, food processing, IT and business process manufacturing, leather, media and entertainment, mining, oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, ports and shipping, railways, renewables, roads and highways, space, textiles, thermal power, tourism, and finally, wellness. Now, India has certain core strengths. So obviously, India can capitalize on those core strengths. What are those core strengths? The first one is labor. India has low-cost labor availability in large numbers. And we can also proudly say that we are one of the few nations on earth to generate a high number of engineering graduates on an annual basis. So India can capitalize on the supply chain of low-cost labor-intensive products like soft toys, apparels, and furniture. The second core strength that India really possesses is raw material availability, like cotton, steel, coal, and downstream petrochemicals. Now, in those industries that can harness domestic production in sectors like electronics, defense, aerospace, these industries see a lot of imports but also have a lot of domestic demand. So this is the right time for India to get into more production in electronics, defense, aerospace industries. So India could first latch on to the global shifts in supply chain of products like apparel, soft toys, furniture, etc., capitalize on the increase in Chinese wage costs. India could harness domestic production in sectors like electronics, defense, and aerospace. We have identified some 6 interesting sectors for the future of Make in India. The first sector is textiles and garments. Now, this sector is highly labor intensive, and India today is one of the top 3 textile and apparel exporting nations of the world. It has become so in the last 3 years. Also, it is the world's largest producer of cotton and has large capacities for polyester and synthetic fiber production. The next interesting sector would be automobile and components. India can consolidate its position as a global auto hub because the penetration level of cars in India currently is still quite low. Future prospects of this sector are intact with the availability of steel, non-ferrous metals, good quality labor, and plastic-based components. The third interesting sector would be electronics. I've already mentioned that. Because this sector import substitution driven and large skill gap. Despite rapidly growing domestic demand, India imports most of its electronic requirements. This can save us, if we actually focus on electronics, we can save $300 billion in electronic goods imports over the next 6 years. But of course, we need to create the right fiscal structures and an ecosystem for this industrial sector. The next interesting sector with a bright future would be chemicals and chemical products. Dream run for this sector is strong because domestic demand growth for paints, textiles, and adhesives is bright. Why? Because of the current increased urbanization and also because of rising disposable incomes. The fifth interesting sector would be the defense and aerospace sector. The government has relaxed FDI norms in this sector. So this has attracted many private companies looking to manufacture military aircraft, high precision equipment, and avionics for passenger aircraft in India for the first time. And this has not happened before, and this industry has really got a very bright future with current prospects. And finally, I would add that the furniture sector has a bright future because the domestic demand is ripe, again due to increased urbanization, increased demand for housing sector, increased disposable income. A considerable part today of the furniture requirements in this country are currently imported from countries like Malaysia. So this industry possesses the right attributes to propel Indian manufacturing forward, given the natural advantages that India possesses in terms of raw material availability, in terms of steel, wood, and low-cost labor. In conclusion, we would like to say that even though India has a lot of drawbacks, like the lack of an enabling infrastructure, poor perception globally in terms of ease of doing business, and a lack of proven ability to compete on a global scale, India's long-term prospects remain quite intact because we have, in the words of our Prime Minister, the 3 Ds, which is demand. We have a population of 1.25 billion and 60% of the population is young. So that means we have that young population starts from we should remember that young people have higher propensity to spend. So if you catch a customer at 25 years, then you have got him for the next 30 years. So MNCs are here to stay for the next 30 years. In many ways, therefore, the stage is set for India to transform its manufacturing and seek global leadership. India is now at the right cusp to increase its contribution from 2% of global GDP in manufacturing to 10% over the next 10 years. But India definitely needs to work on its poor infrastructure through investments in highways, ports, and power. We also need radical labor reforms, simpler tax structures, so that makes GST, the goods and service tax implementation, mandatory, and easier access to credit mechanisms. These few steps have to be now undertaken on a war footing. This brings us to an end of this presentation on Make in India. I hope you found it worthwhile enough. Now, if you have any questions.
Yeah, so the question came in, able to ask in audio, but there is one chat which asks, can you please explain on us about FDI?
All right. Now, FDI, it means foreign direct investment. Now, the government of India wants foreign companies to use India as a manufacturing hub. That means use India as a place to manufacture their goods. They can manufacture in India, they can sell it in India because India's population is pretty big. And they will also be able to export from India. So this has twofold benefits. Foreign companies come to India, they manufacture in India, they sell it in India. So that is foreign direct investment. And then they use India to sell their goods outside. Now, foreign direct investment happens when you have a multinational company like, say, Hyundai Motor Corporation, which sets up a manufacturing plant around on the Chennai-Bangalore industrial corridor. Or you have a Toyota Motors, which sets up a manufacturing or an assembly plant in Bidadi, Karnataka. So they do this. Why do they do this? Is because they find cheap labor who can assemble the cars in India. Now, what the government is saying is, you come here, don't assemble, you manufacture the entire car in India. So I hope I have been able to explain the concept of foreign direct investment clearly. Are there any more questions?
About the defense production.
Yes.
I want you to give a talk. Why foreign countries are invited here to start the defense materials and equipments?
Yes. Well, this is an interesting question. We have traditionally been importing most of our defense requirements. So that has been a drain on India's foreign exchange reserves, besides not helping develop our technological capacities in defense production. So if we invite foreign direct investment, that is foreign multinationals, and also, of course, Indian private sector players, if they are interested in defense production, the entry of foreign multinationals will help us to get the much needed technology which we don't have. So the government has not opened up the defense sector completely. It has invited foreign players to partner with Indian companies through which technology transfer can happen. So this is one step towards building up technological capacities in the defense sector for increasing our production. It helps create technological capacities. It helps stop imports in defense. So that's a lot of saving on our import bill and improves our foreign exchange reserves. Any more questions?
See, on the right hand side, there is a question. Why we should invite foreign people? Indian people have a lot of talent.
Just a minute. I think I didn't get through the idea. Of course, Indian people have talent, but Indian people do not have the technology. It's not a question of talent at all. It's a question of having the right technology. Now, the technology that we have is probably not cost effective for us to be able to produce. So Indian companies, if you know, India is one of the few countries in the world that that spends very less on research and development. It's actually as less as 0.8% of GDP. Now, other nations like Germany, for instance, spends more than 10% of GDP annually on research and development. So the technologies that they have in defense manufacturing, or even Russia that they have in manufacturing of defense products, we don't have. So if we try to produce an aeroplane today, which is a military aircraft, the cost of production of that military aircraft will be far higher. So we need to be cost effective, not produce very expensive products, but at the same time, we need to learn the new technologies. So we need them to pass on the technology to us. So we are not telling them that we are not giving our entire secrets to them. So there is a lot of threat, or in the political circles, that if you open up defense sector, you are actually opening up the defense secure, because defense builds the nation's security. But that's not what the government intends to do. They just want the foreign companies to come and partner, as in have joint ventures with Indian companies. So that way, the product gets manufactured in India with Indian companies, and the Indian company learns the technique. So in India, you have maybe one Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. But Aeronautics Limited, we need more such Indian companies come up in developing defense products today. We need to build up or scale up the production in our own nation. Any more questions? Yes, please.
Yes. Last question. In spite of having so many banks with us in India,
yes,
why the government is encouraging foreign banks and insurance business to India?
You mean to say, because banking is different and insurance is different, are you asking whether why foreign banks operate in India, or why
foreign banks are interested to come to India? That is my first question. Please answer. Then next, why insurance business is getting popular, and foreign companies are more involved in this?
All right. Now, one thing is the reason why government needs. There are a couple of reasons. Let me come step by step. When Indian government opened up the banking sector, it opened up in 1991, not today. So at that time, Indian banking sector was in a mess. It was ruled by public sector banks, which had its own problems. They had to follow the diktats of the government. They had to lend more to priority sectors like agriculture, village artisans, small scale sector. So they couldn't really recover the loans that they gave out, which means they ran into something called bad loans, which is in technological terms called non-performing assets. Now, those banks were therefore very inefficient. They were running into losses. So the government needed to increase the efficiency of the banking sector by opening up. That means allowing private participation, not only by Indian private sector banks, but also from foreign private sector banks. Because, again, coming back to technology, we lacked technology. We did not know about simple technology like the automated teller machines before 1991. A banking sector person, today when you walk into a bank, you are so used to seeing, whereas Indian banking was so highly inefficient that we really really recorded all our transactions in paper, in registers. And the reason why we have foreign banking today in India is, one, increase the cost effectiveness through introduction of more technology. So they got technology, they helped us learn technology. First came foreign banks, then came the growth of Indian private sector banks. It was not the other way around. And finally, the growth of the transformation of the public sector banks towards more technologically advanced public sector banks. So even today, SBI, State Bank of India, has been forced to improve its technological efficiency and bring down its cost of transaction. That would have answered your why foreign banks have been allowed to come to India.
Welcome.
And one more thing that I would like to point out is, foreign banks do not lend to the priority sector, which is the agricultural sectors and the small scale sectors. They mostly make advances to the corporate sector. Now, these nationalized banks, the public sector banks, so to say, like Punjab National Bank or State Bank of India, they had other motives. They were set up by the government to finance public sector undertakings like Bharat Heavy Electrical Limited or BEML like Bharat Earth Movers Limited or the agricultural farmer. So they didn't have enough money left for the corporate sector. You needed also to give money to the corporate sector. So who would give that money? We didn't have Indian private sector banks. So the only way was to invite the foreign private sector banks to come to India.
Correct.
Right. So anything else?
Insurance?
I think the same answers will go for the insurance sector as well. If you go back, say, 15 years, the Indian, not even 15 years, I would say maybe another 10 years, Indian insurance sector was ruled by the three biggies, which is Life Insurance Corporation, General Insurance Corporation, and National Insurance Corporations. Indians, by insurance, Life Insurance Corporation or the name LIC is a generic name. Any Indian can be asked this question, and they will say that they only understand life insurance company. It's a government company, but they didn't realize that life insurance corporation was only taking insurance premiums and giving them very less return. So there is no innovation in financial products. Today, the insurance sector has grown because the newcomers, mostly foreign newcomers, again foreign companies have not come on their own because the government has not allowed 100% equity partnership in the insurance sector. So they have come in partnership with Indian companies. So you have a Bharti AXA or a Tata AIG or an HDFC Standard Life, or you have an ICICI Prudential. So each foreign company, each name that you see now is basically a combination of an Indian company and a foreign company. So as a result of this, today you not only have more choice in terms of insurance products, but you have newer types of insurance products. So you have variety. So the customer has more variety. He can buy an insurance product which is not only just giving him insurance, but also giving him investment opportunities. So that's better. I pay a premium. I am assured of higher return. Isn't it better for the customer?
That's right.
Any more questions? Okay, I can see one question. Will there be fine quality of products which every customer wants? Yes, of course. That's the whole idea. That, if you have foreign technology working in India, then you have better technology. Let's take the automobile sector, for instance. When I was young, I mean, that was a very long time ago, I used to remember only cars manufactured by Hindustan Motors, which manufactured something called an ambassador car. There was no choice there. Today, you have 10, at least out of the 10 top Indian manufacturing companies, automobile companies, the first one, which is Maruti Suzuki, is a joint venture between an Indian company and Suzuki Motor Corporation of Japan. It has got more than 50% share in India's automobile market, and not in the high-end segment alone, but in the low-end entry segment. So that is an answer itself, because they got fuel-efficient cars to India. The Ambassador was in no way fuel-efficient. To have the technology to build a fuel-efficient car. So we had to invite a foreign company to produce in India, and they have produced in India. Afterwards, today you have Hyundai, you have Toyota, now you have in the ultra luxury segment, you have BMW, you have Tata Motors, which have now purchased Range Rovers. So of course, question of quality is completely answered by increasing foreign direct investment, at least, and if not more, in the automobile segment. Any further questions?